Okay, let's dive deep today into a subject that feels both instantly recognizable and, well, incredibly mysterious. Ancient Egyptian art. You see the images everywhere, the pyramids, the Sphinx, those striking profiles, the hieroglyphs. But what were they really for? Were they just decoration?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
And how did they reflect the lives, the beliefs of the people who made them? And could any of it possibly have something to do with, say, a Picasso painting in the 20th century?
It's quite a journey, spanning thousands of years. And you're right, it's far more than just aesthetics. Egyptian art is profoundly functional.
Functional, okay.
It's a direct visual window into their worldview, their religion, their social structure, their whole understanding of the cosmos, really.
So not just pretty pictures.
Definitely not. It's deeply symbolic. And this is what kind of struck me reading through our source material. It's surprisingly adaptable over that staggering timeline while still holding on to these core principles.
That adaptability is fascinating, given how long it lasted. It has this immediate visual power, but there's just so much depth underneath.
Exactly.
And to guide us through this millennia-spanning story, we've pulled from an excellent source, A Brief History of Egyptian Art.
Right.
This article really lays out this vast history step by step, from the earliest, scratches on rock walls right through to the Roman period, and even hints at its incredible legacy.
Yeah, it's a great guy. It walks us through the different historical periods chronologically, which is really crucial for understanding how the art evolved. It helps us see how certain foundational principles stayed remarkably constant, while the art itself shifted and changed in really intriguing ways, always mirroring the society it served, the times people lived in.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack that history. We're going to journey through the major periods, pinpoint the key characteristics, identify the surprising shifts.
Get to the heart of it.
Exactly. And truly understand what this enduring artistic tradition can tell us about the people who created and lived with it. We want you to come away from this feeling genuinely well-informed about this incredible, influential aspect of human history. Let's unpack this together.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we start? At the very beginning.
Well, the source points out something really fundamental right at the start, this idea that art isn't just some kind of luxury item that only happens after society's sorted out, food and shelter.
Right, the basics.
Yeah. It argues art is fundamental to human culture, often developing right alongside the basics, and crucially alongside community law and religion.
That's key. It wasn't an add-on.
In Egypt, this started incredibly early, right back in the pre-dynastic period, stretching way back from around 6,000 all the way to about 3150 BCE. We're talking rock art, simple pottery decorations, that kind of thing.
Yeah, basic stuff, but important. Art was woven into the very beginnings of organized society there. And even in those earliest pre-dynastic images, we find, rock art showing animals, people, maybe supernatural figures. You can actually see the seeds of a core value.
Okay.
A value that would come to define all Egyptian culture and art for the next 3,000 years. The concept of balance.
Ah, yes, Ma'at. This is such a central idea for understanding Egypt, isn't it?
Absolutely. Ma'at is this fundamental concept of cosmic harmony, balance, justice, truth, order. The Egyptians believed it literally sustained the universe.
Kept chaos away.
Exactly. It was a divine order. And our source makes it so clear. All Egyptian art, from the grandest temple relief down to the smallest amulet, is fundamentally based on reflecting this ideal, perfectly balanced world of the gods.
Yeah.
A world where Ma'at reigns supreme.
So the art isn't necessarily trying to capture the messy, imperfect reality of everyday life with all its ups and downs.
No, not really. It's trying to depict the world as it should be, in that state of divine order and balance. It's maybe aspirational or even prescriptive, like you said.
Presenting an ideal state.
Exactly, a reflection of Ma'at. And inherently tied to that is another crucial point the source emphasizes, one that really sets Egyptian art apart from many later traditions.
Which is?
Egyptian art was always, unequivocally, functional first.
Functional first, okay.
This is where it really diverges from maybe a modern Western idea of art for art's sake, where the main purpose might be aesthetics or self-expression. For the Egyptians, the form served a purpose. Always.
Can you give us some more specific examples from the source? Because that feels like such a fundamental difference in mindset.
Sure. Think about a statue. No matter how beautifully carved, how technically brilliant, its primary purpose was to serve as a physical home for a spirit, a ka, or maybe a god. It had to embody that entity.
So it's a vessel, almost.
In a way, yes. Or an amulet, like one of those scarab beetles you see so often. It might look nice, made of lapis lazuli or pharaohs, maybe, but its aesthetic appeal was secondary. Its driving force, its function, was protection.
Right, warding off evil, ensuring rebirth.
Exactly. Tomb paintings, temple tableaus, even carefully designed sacred gardens within a temple complex. They all had a profound purpose, often linked to ensuring life continues, the prosperity of the land, the human-God relationship, or just reminding people of eternal life and stability, for the individual and for the whole community.
So it wasn't just something nice to look at, it did something tangible on a spiritual or practical level. It had a job.
It absolutely had a job. And this foundational value of balance, reflecting Matt, expressed visually as symmetry and order in compositions, it becomes fully realized very early on.
When are we talking?
We see its principles firmly established in the early dynastic period, starting around 3150 BCE, right as Egypt is unifying.
And the classic example from this period, the one the source really focuses on, is the Narmer palette. That feels like such a crucial artifact.
Oh, the Narmer palette is pivotal. It dates to around 3200, 3000 BCE. It's a ceremonial object, this siltstone slab, shaped a bit like a shield, about 2 feet tall.
Okay.
It was made specifically to celebrate the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under King Narmer, who many think is the same person as Men's, the legendary first pharaoh. It's more than just an object. It's a carved narrative, a powerful statement about kingship and unity.
And the carvings themselves are incredibly sophisticated for such an early period, aren't they? Especially working in stone.
They truly are. It's carved in low raised relief. The figures are slightly raised from the background, and it's done with incredible skill and precision for that time. On the front, the more famous side, you see King Narmer, show much larger than anyone else.
Showing his importance.
Right, establishing that immediately. He's linked with the divine strength of the bowl, possibly the Apis bowl representing power. He's wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, smiting an enemy, a standard image of pharaonic power that lasts for millennia. Below him, you see defeated enemies.
And the other side.
On the reverse, he's shown wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt in a triumphant procession, inspecting rows of decapitated enemies. This double representation, wearing both crowns, triumphing in both regions, it just reinforces that theme of unification.
And there's that complex scene with the two men wrestling those strange beasts with long necks.
Yes, the serpoparts. That scene is particularly interesting. It shows two figures holding ropes around the long intertwined necks of these mythical leopard-like creatures with serpentine necks.
Right.
Now, the source notes this is often interpreted as representing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, the intertwined necks symbolizing the joining.
Makes sense.
But it also points out this view is contested by some scholars. There's actually no clear Egyptian textual or artistic evidence from the period that definitively links these specific creatures, or their intertwined necks, to Upper and Lower Egypt.
Oh, okay. So it might be something else.
It might be. It could be an older Mesopotamian motif they incorporated for its symbolic power, maybe representing chaos being brought under control by the king. It's a good reminder that even classic interpretations in Egyptology can be debated. You have to look closely at the evidence.
That's fair. A good reminder about interpretation. But taken as a whole, the Narmer palette isn't just a record. It's a political statement, a religious statement linking the king to divine power, a historical marker, all wrapped in a masterwork of early carving technique. Really set a standard.
Precisely. It embodies that functional aspect, legitimizing the king, the unified state, and shows that early mastery of stone. And that mastery continued developing rapidly. By the end of the early dynastic period, around 2670 BCE, you have figures like Imhotep.
Imhotep, architect of King Djoser's step pyramid complex at Saqqara. The genius, right? Often called the world's first recorded polymath.
Yes, a truly remarkable figure. Architect, engineer, physician, scribe. And his architectural work wasn't just structural. It was deeply integrated with art. Again, embodying that function first principle on a massive scale.
How so?
Well, the complex wasn't just a tomb. It was a simulated landscape for the king's afterlife, built in stone. Images like lotus flowers for Upper Egypt, papyrus plants for Lower Egypt, the Djed symbol representing stability, the backbone of Osiris. They were intricately worked into the architecture, high and low relief.
So part of the building itself.
Exactly. They weren't just decorations. There were symbolic elements reinforcing the king's power, the land's unity, the promise of eternal stability after death. And alongside this architectural art, sculptors by this time had truly mastered working in stone to create durable, three-dimensional, life-size statues.
Like the statue of Djoser himself.
Yes, the statue of Djoser, often shown seated or standing very formally, is highlighted by the source as one of the greatest works from this era. It shows that early skill in portraiture in form.
You can really see the technical skill leaping forward. Which brings us, I guess, to the era most people probably think of immediately when they picture Egyptian art, the Old Kingdom.
The Age of the Pyramids.
Exactly.
Or the Age of Giants, as the outline calls it. Roughly 2613 to 2181 BCE, covering the 3rd through 6th dynasties. This is when you have a strong central government, managing vast resources, plus economic prosperity. Those conditions provided the means and the control for those truly monumental works we all know.
The icons. The Great Pyramid of Giza for Khufu, the Sphinx. Just the scale is mind-boggling.
Yes, those are the famous architectural examples. But the period also produced incredibly elaborate tomb and temple paintings inside those structures. And refined obelisks, those tall, tapering pillars topped with a pyramid shape. They'd been developed earlier but were used much more widely now. Symbols of the sun god and royal power.
What about the statuary during this peak period? Was it pushing boundaries technically, like the architecture?
Well, the source notes something interesting here. While the statuary from the Old Kingdom is technically incredibly skilled, exceptional execution, capturing likeness with remarkable fidelity, especially in portraits of scribes or nobles, it remained largely static in form compared to the rapid developments we saw earlier.
Static? How so?
It even draws a comparison between that early dynastic statue of Djoser we just mentioned and a small ivory statue of King Khufu from the Old Kingdom. It notes they display a very similar formal pose and technique, despite the huge difference in scale and material. The form becomes standardized, almost canonical.
So the technique was perfected, maybe reaching a peak of execution, but the basic pose, the look of the statue, was kind of locked in.
That's a good way to put it.
And
the skill was extraordinary, but the form was highly constrained. And the key reason for this uniformity, this adherence to specific conventions, according to the source, art during the Old Kingdom was overwhelmingly state-mandated.
Okay, the state called the shots.
Exactly. The king and the highest nobility were the main patrons. They commissioned almost all the surviving artwork we find in pyramids, tombs, temples. And they didn't just pay for it. They often dictated the style, the subject matter, the conventions artists had to follow.
So individual artistic vision, while maybe there, had to fit the client's requirements. Requirements tied to state ideology, religious function, maintaining that image of timeless order and power.
Precisely. Artists were highly skilled, capable of great technical variation, but their public output, the stuff that survived, had to conform. This adherence to a prescribed style created that sense of enduring, unchanging power the Old Kingdom pharaohs wanted to project.
And that held until
the Old Kingdom state structure itself started to unravel and eventually collapsed after the 6th dynasty around 2181 BCE. That ushered in a new, very different era.
the first intermediate period, roughly 2181 to 2040 BCE. Now, this period has often been characterized quite negatively, right? Chaos, decline, a dark age.
It has, traditionally. But the source offers a more nuanced view, which I think is really important. It challenges that idea of pure chaos or a dark age. Yes, there was political confusion, loss of central authority, regional governors got more powerful than the weak king. But the source argues it was also a time of tremendous cultural change and even growth in some ways, precisely because of that decentralization.
So the different quality of art we see wasn't necessarily a sign of decline in skill, but maybe a reflection of the changed political landscape.
That's exactly the argument. The source makes the point that the different quality and appearance of the art from this period, which some earlier Egyptologists might have dismissed as low quality or degenerate, wasn't because artists suddenly forgot how to carve or paint.
Right.
It resulted directly from the lack of a strong central government and those strict state mandates that had controlled art in the Old Kingdom.
So not worse art, just different art, made under different circumstances.
Exactly. With central authority weakened, the different districts, the nomes throughout Egypt, were effectively free to develop their own artistic visions and styles. Patrons were regional governors, local officials, even wealthier individuals, not just the king in Memphis. This led to a greater diversity of styles across the country, reflecting local traditions and preferences. That wasn't possible under the uniform state control before.
And the lack of those massive monumental projects like pyramids, was that a sign the civilization was failing?
Again, the source gives a practical explanation. It wasn't necessarily a decline in capability or will, it was largely a lack of funds.
Money.
Yeah, the incredible cost of those huge Old Kingdom monuments had, over centuries, basically drained the central treasury. When the state collapsed, there just weren't centralized resources left for those kinds of colossal state-sponsored projects. So art continued, but it shifted in scale and who was paying for it.
That makes perfect sense. So instead of massive